All right, excellent. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be presenting. As Shane had said here, why would you want to present? Sometimes there's already video on here. Well, as you can see, I already have a video on this subject somewhat. So today we're going to be talking about this thing that was mentioned, this GitHub. What is this thing of Git, and how does it relate to the Power Platform? Source control. So as you know, the video I did actually about 3 years ago, and things have changed a little bit. Microsoft likes to make our jobs a little bit easier. We're going to talk about source control, specifically the recently released general availability Git integration. So with that said, we're not going to take a whole hour. We've got 15 minutes here. We're going to go pretty fast, and we're going to focus specifically on the Git integration. I'm still going to use the old slides. These are about 3 years old, and we're going to skip over about 2/3 of it and just give you a quick overview. For those of you that aren't familiar with Git, this is basically going to allow you to scale out as you have larger teams. So we'll go ahead and dive right into it. So right here, off the top, big picture with our agenda, as I mentioned, there is a lot that you can go into. Historically, if you wanted to set this up, it was pretty involved. On today's agenda, we're going to dive in specifically on the Git integration. So when we look at source control, setting it up, well, the question you first want to look at is, well, why do we even care about this, right? Do we really need source control? And I'll just preface this by saying, if you are a single developer, not really working with multiple people on your team, you don't have to deal with multiple chains of releases that you're juggling and trying to figure out who goes first and dependencies between them, then this may be a little bit overkill. But Microsoft's made it so much easier that you might find this actually is really sweet. So let's talk about what we're trying to actually solve with source control. If you go look in the Power Platform, you'll find that you have the concept of solutions. There was the old debate about managed versus unmanaged. Isolating work. So say you're working on an application, 2 different features are being developed, but they have dependencies on each other. You want to release one, but you're concerned about feature leaks from the other. That's a really big factor right there. Also, backup and just having a backup. Now, there are alternatives. You could say, well, I can use solution segmentation. To an extent, yes, you can somewhat isolate your features. You can use feature flags so that you basically have a variable to turn things on or off in the production environment. So it might technically be deployed, you just haven't turned it on. Following a very strict release cadence, source control basically helps you with all of these problems, right? So again, if you want to look into this whole topic, I've got an hour-long presentation that's been on YouTube for like 3 years. You can go look at that. We're going to go ahead and skip through here. With the solution layering, just by the way, the Power Platform, you can have 500 layers solutions deep, and it'll keep running without a tick, right? If you go pull up my blog, I've got an article on that. So again, not really a concern here. But we do want to be very clear. An environment is not source control. Yes, you can use it for backups and whatnot, but it's not going to give you the same level of control and the ability to very finely decide when you want to release specific features on a comprehensive, large application. And with that note, the steps in this big picture, if you throw everything in source control, you can basically have what are called branches where 2 different developers are working on different features. They go through a series of commits. When you're ready, you go from their dev environments, you merge everything to a release or a dev main build environment, and you push that out to prod. Again, concepts of source control, go look at the video. We're going to go ahead and click through here. Historically, this is very complex to set up, right? You had to go in, use either PowerShell scripting or DevOps, set this all up, and you can do it. So that's all available in that hour-plus long video. What we're going to go to today is just how it looks now for your non-pro developer in the Power Platform. It's just as easy as a click of a button. So we're going to switch gears and come over to the native integration. Now, I just saw this a couple months ago. It was in preview, gave it a try, and reached out and said, hey, this is really interesting. I think the community would really benefit from having source control now that Microsoft has made it so much easier. So we're going to switch over here. and just show you how to turn this thing on, get you started. Again, with 15 minutes, the purpose is not to go through everything about source control and merge pull requests, conflict resolution, but just show you how to turn it on so that you can go in and start experimenting with it. So that said, steps are pretty straightforward. You're going to go into the environment, into the solution setting. There's a new button in here. It says connect to Git. This was, again, made generally available just this last month. So we'll go ahead and switch over and do a demo of this, just hands-on. So right here, we'll pull up my environment. And I am in this environment called THP Demos. That's my helpful bit blog environment I use for demos and stuff. In here, I've got a solution called Demo Integration, another one called Demos. I'm going to go ahead and just use this one right here. And actually, yep. Go back out to the solution layer right here. So this button should be available in your tenant now, again, generally available. Go ahead and click Connect to Git. As a prerequisite, two things you want to be aware of. This is a managed environment feature. Basically, you need to have Dataverse in there. So if you got your premium licenses, you're good to go. And you do need to set up the source control repo first. So to do that, you'd come over to Azure DevOps, create a project, create a repo. The assumption here is that if you're doing Git, you probably know how to set this up. It's really easy. Just basically go in DevOps, create a repo. And then if you go to the repo details, you'd have a link to clone it and whatnot, but you don't even need to do that. Just come in here, tell it you want to sync, connect it to Git. Now there are two options with this. You can either sync basically the full environment or just an individual solution. Now, to get started, I strongly recommend just start with the environment. Yes, you can do it on a solution by solution basis. If you select the environment option, that's going to basically sync all of your solutions in separate folders, all of the assets that are in those solutions. It'll keep track of all that for you. On the organization, this is your Azure DevOps organization. So one of the gotchas with this, if you're using, say, GitHub, this currently only works with Azure DevOps. Now, down the road, I wouldn't be surprised if they add the ability to work with, say, GitHub. So in this case, I'm going to select my helpful bit organization, my project that's in there. The repository is this THP demos one that I've got on. And then you need to select the branch. Okay, so basically the idea in source control with a branch is to isolate work between multiple developers, say either on a feature by feature basis or sometimes per specific developer. It depends on your approach. You'll have a main branch that is your production ready code. And then when someone starts working on a feature, you'll typically create a branch, work on that. So the idea here is your Power Platform environments should be considered disposable, right? You build a feature in there, you reset the environment or you sync it back to the main, and then you merge your changes in when they're approved, tested, ready to go to prod. For this demo, I'm just going to go ahead and select the main branch, but as a best practice, only your production ready code would be in there. And then this is under a folder. You're going to tell it what folder within that branch you want to sync it to. So again, you can have separate folders for different things that are all synced. Go ahead and hit connect. This is awesome. It only takes about 10 or 15 seconds maybe. Let that connect. And we are now connected. Okay. So the way this works is if you come over to this DevOps project and you look at the history, you can see all of these changes that have been made in this environment. As I first tested this just not too long ago to make sure it worked, get ready for the demo. If I come into the environment and say, for example, I have two developers. Our scenario is you've got, say, an application form that has contact information, first name, last name, etc. So I'm going to come into my solution. The one that we just chose to sync was this demos one. And on the, I'm going to use this demo merge conflict table. So say we have a model-driven app. And if we look at the forms, I'm in the environment. If I open up the information form, let's say I am a non-professional developer. So citizen developer, maker, I come in here and I've made some first changes and I'm going to just say, you know what, this should have been first name I know what I was doing or should have been doing. This should have been last name. Okay. And this should have just been birth date. Okay. So I change that. I go ahead and say save and publish. Do that work in this environment. Okay. Now I'm going to come back out of here. We'll give this a second to publish. One of the issues you'll run into with your development, the reason we have source control is occasionally you have two different people working on things. They're developing separate features, but they might touch the same form, and both of those developers might make a different change. So then we have a conflict, right? So by comparison, if a pro dev was working on this and they were looking in this folder, all of this is stored in source control. If I look in THP demos under entities, this was my demo merge conflict. And under the form XML on my main form, I have a YAML file. Okay. So inside of here, you'll note that it was Maker's first name. The professional developer might have looked at it and said, hey, that new guy just totally screwed this up. Let me fix this for him. So they've got a few options. They could edit it in here. They could also edit it in VS Code and then just sync it back up. So you can see right here, if they want to do it here. Either way, most likely if they're a pro dev, they're probably working in, say, VS Code or Visual Studio. But I'm going to go ahead and just sync it right here and then say this should have been first name. And this should have been last name. That was the same. But say I'm from the United Kingdom or whatever reason, I call it surname instead, just because. And then on birth date, maybe this was a driver's license application. And for my own reasons, I called it DOB, date of birth, right? And I could commit this, and I'm just going to say on here, fixed contact fields. Okay. Now, again, I'm doing this right on the main dev branch, which is not best practice. Typically, you'd work on a separate development feature branch, and then you'd merge all the changes. But for the fact that we've got 15 minutes, you've got here two different personas working. A professional developer that came in, fixed some things. He did his commit. If I look at the history now, you can see this is showing here. But if I go back into my source control environment, and let's get back out of here, I now want to go ahead and push my stuff into source control. So once I've enabled the source control integration, on the left-hand side, there's this button that says source control. Give this 1 second and it syncs up. I'm going to go ahead and say check for updates. And I do see there are questions on here popping up, so we'll take questions at the end, provided we have time. You'll see that this says there are two conflicts. Now, I do want to be clear that this is a new feature, and at this point, unlike a professional developer working in Visual Studio, which we don't have time to go over how to deal with a merge conflict in a more professional sense, but the idea is if you have a Fusion development team, someone on your team with Git would know how to work through that. For your maker, at least they know, hey, there's a conflict. Two of us both tried to catch the same football and we ran into each other. Okay. Now in here, new feature, it won't tell you exactly what the conflict is, but if they look at this, you see there's a solution, there's these updates. Close all the comments right here. So if I click this solution right here, I have the choice at least to either keep, current, or accept. Now, if I click this detail, this will actually open up the DevOps repo. And this is where, truth be told, they're not going to know what to do with this. There's probably too much code. If they're familiar, they can go ask the professional developer, but they can sit down and say, all right, Mr. Professional Developer, can you help me work through this? They could do it. Or if they know that, hey, what I did is correct across the board through all of the changes, they can come in here and they can simply hit this button and say, you know what, I'm going to keep what I did in this environment and say, yes, I want to do that. Okay. And then same thing here with this other publisher, keep my own changes here. All right. All right. Source control being processed. That might take a second to come through here. So in the sake of time, similar to what I just did here in this environment where I made some changes and I clicked commit, right here, this button that's grayed out, you will be able to click commit, put in a little message that explains what the change is about. Right there, probably if I click the individual one. Oh, it's got to sync in the background. So demo gods are not with me today. Too many other changes in that solution, probably because I pushed something right before we started the call. That will then push those over into the source control. And then right here, if you look at the history on this branch, and let's go back to the top level for the entire solution, you will see a change that I had pushed in those changes from this environment. Okay. So can we co-author the Git integration? I see that from the Shinth. I'm not sure what you mean by co-author the Git integration. I know you may be referring to the fact that we now have the ability to co-author in the Canvas app editor. So that is still a separate feature. Basically, this is on an environment by environment basis. So yeah, you could still have people co-authoring in there to edit it. This, you can think of this as a separate feature and a separate capability. The cool thing with this, again, that you get is you get a history of all the changes as people work on things. And if there are conflicts, you know about it. Co-author model-driven apps, that's a totally different thing, which I believe Microsoft was working on, but I haven't seen that. Okay, so back over here, if we run through a couple other things on the slides. So gotchas and limitations, as one thing you'll note, there may still be some bugs. It's technically general availability. I've seen a few bugs. When you first spin it up, if you have an existing solution that's out in source control and you create a new environment, it doesn't automatically pull that in. As far as I can see, you have to basically import the solution to get it recognize it there. But if you start with it in a new environment, turn it on, and then push it to source control, it works just fine that way. Merge conflicts, as we covered already, you have to basically just deal with those in a more traditional professional sense. If you want to have a line by line selection of like, I want this field change, but not that one, you can do that sort of thing in Git using the command line. So your Fusion development, professional development teams would know how to deal with merge conflicts. But for your non-makers, at least at this point, you can select, do I want to keep my copy versus the incoming? You know that there's a conflict there. Limitation, similar to the merge conflict, there isn't currently a way that you can stage just individual lines. So as you saw, I changed 3 different fields there. So if you want to say do a commit with just one of those and commit to that, that's something you'd regularly do in a professional development setting. Doesn't allow you that level of granularity, but again, it does allow you to take whatever changes. So best practice there is you want to commit frequently smaller changes. That way you see the history. Caveat here, kind of, if you have worked with the Pack CLI, you may know that they had an experimental feature for a while that would unpack and pack your Canvas apps. The underlying schema that they used for that, they abandoned and they restarted. So it's now based on YAML. It replaces rather than works with the traditional XML JSON file. So like if you go to the solution experience and export a solution file, it has JSON in there. It's a totally different underlying format. And the reason they did that is because for it to be able to take these changes and merge them together like a zipper, they need to be very careful to ensure that line by line things can be separated out. So it is a new format. You can't just use the old solutions and put them in. This would effectively replace this. As noted, it binds to only one branch. That's not a limitation. That's really more of a feature. So again, each environment should be tied to one branch and one branch only. I'm not entirely sure if all components are supported. This time I haven't seen any issue. Another big one, if you have code first components, say plugins, TypeScript, PCF controls, that have to be compiled or transpiled in the case of PCF controls. That's a much more pro dev heavy side of things. You'd put those into a separate folder. You'd have a build process. But if you're doing that level of stuff, then probably you have someone that knows what they're doing with that as well. 25 megabyte commit limit, that's probably not an issue unless you have a really big solution. That's a fairly large solution file, but just something to be aware of. So best practices, make your commits clean and frequent, deploy new versions of the solution. So instead of like re-exporting smaller solutions one at a time, in general, you want to have a solution that you update and deploy a new version of the solution. Okay. So as you move forward with this, again, go out and play, give it a try. Brand new feature, just barely came into GA. Personally, just from what I've seen, I think it's still got a little ways to go, but Microsoft's definitely moving the right direction with it. And if you do have questions, of course, by all means, you can reach out to me. I work for Planet Technologies as a solution architect, so you can contact us here. Otherwise, if you want to reach out, my blog is on helpfulbit.com. You'll see some articles on there, and you can find me, Ryan Perry, MBA, on LinkedIn.